Hey guys, how's everybody doing? It's Lou. I'm back with a vinyl finds video. Most of these finds are, I think they're online purchases for the most part. Maybe a couple of record store buys as well. What I've got playing in the background, don't know how well I can hear it, is this album here. It's a Foo Fighters debut album. I used to be really heavily into Nirvana, and so after that band ended, I was really big time into the Foo Fighters and this album. Got it on the day of release on CD, and I've kind of lost track of the Foo Fighters along the way. Not picking up every single release. The first few, like this one here, the color and the shape. And then after that it kind of fizzled out a little bit, but I still pay attention. I may start listening to a little bit of their new album, Concrete and Gold. It sounds okay, but I still think, in my opinion, this is my favorite Foo Fighters album. I'll Stick Around, This Is a Call, For All the Cows, Big Me. I still think this is their best album. And it was at a time when Dave Grohl he did everything on this album, as far as I know. They didn't have a band together. He did put a band together after this for touring purposes, and then that, had a few lineup changes over the years. But this is really solo Dave Grohl, an excellent, excellent album, and this is the reissue of that. Next, we have the Love debut album. I've been looking to get this on vinyl for quite a while now, and even earlier this year I got the CD because I couldn't find it, and I finally found a reissue of this. I love this band. This is one of my favorite psych bands out there, West Coast psych, and I love this album as much as I love Forever Changes. This is a great album. Different albums, but I still really, really love this album. Sticking with psych, an album and a band that I didn't really know until I saw some people show it on the VC, and then I started listening to some clips on YouTube. Another psych band, July, and as far as I'm aware, this is their only album. And I've seen a few people show this in their psych lists of their favorite psych records. And I think this band then, after making this album and breaking up, went on to form a band. I think they were called Jade Warrior. I'm not very familiar with their work. And I think after that, I think a couple of the guys became members of Uriah Heep, another band that I'm not familiar of. I think they're more hard rock type band, but I love this album. This is excellent. There's some Beatles out. This is your typical, I think, mid to late 60s UK psych. There's some Beatles elements in there. I hear a little bit of Syd Barrett in there. This is excellent. I love this album. I don't use the word Grail very often, but I used it a few videos ago when I showed an album by one of my favorite bands of all time, Catherine Wheel. Catherine Wheel were associated in the beginning with the UK shoegaze scene back in the early 90s. And I got the Catherine Wheel album, Ferment, their debut, and I had that on CD for forever since it came out. And it finally got reissued on orange marbled vinyl, and that was a grail for me. Another grail for me is Catherine Wheel's second album, Chrome, and this again is also a reissue. This one is on silver vinyl. I'll show you what that looks like. This is all part of the Music on Vinyl series, which, their releases, I really like their releases. Sound pretty good, and colored vinyl, always nice to have, not a must, but this is a grail for me because this album, Chrome, along with Ferment, are two of my favorite albums of all time. Again, very shoegaze influenced. some great alternative guitar music on this. There's a song on here, the big song on here is called Crank. The Nude was also a big single and favorite among Catherine Wheel fans. Show Me Mary, those 3 tracks. But there's also a song on here, a slower song called Fripp, which is a direct reference to Robert Fripp from King Crimson. Really happy to get that. My brother-in-law picked that one up for me. In a similar vein to Catherine Wheel, also associated or more closely associated with the UK shoegaze scene is this band, Swerve Driver. And I've shown some Swerve Driver before. This is Swerve Driver's second album and probably their best album, Mezcal Head. Again, back from the early 90s. This is also on the Music on Vinyl label. While associated with shoegaze, I think there's a little bit more muscle in a band like Swerve Driver as compared to some of the other bands like Ride or Slow Dive and even My Bloody Valentine. There's a little bit more muscle, I think, in this band. Next, an album back from the 90s of a band that I was really heavily into and wanting to get on vinyl for the longest time. We got the Cranberries and their debut. Everybody else is doing it, so why can't we? This, of course, is the album with the big singles Linger and Dreams. The Cranberries, I was really into them, especially with their early, probably first 3 albums or so. Their second album was also quite a big hit. No Need to Argue. That, of course, had this song, Zombie. I tend to prefer this album over No Need to Argue. The pressing of this record is excellent. The instrumentation, it just pops out. Sounds amazing, and the artwork on this is fantastic, and it's a really thick gatefold. The spine is really thick as well. I love it when you get a single record and it comes in a gatefold, and the packaging is just excellent on this, and it sounds fantastic. Next, an album that I've had on CD forever, and I found it cheap on Amazon. It's the 2016 remaster of Pink Floyd, Animals. Don't need to say much about this record. I think everybody's pretty familiar with this gatefold as well. This is an awesome Pink Floyd album. I think mostly everybody out there who's into Pink Floyd has this, so it's great to finally get this on vinyl. And leading to this year, new releases, it's been kind of light in terms of the amount of new releases that I've purchased. But one new release that I did get from a band from back in the 80s is the band Dream Syndicate. And How Did I Find Myself Here is the name of this album. This is probably my top new release of this year. I just got this, it came out in September, but this is amazing. The Dream Syndicate, some of their albums from back in the 80s that some of you might know, The Days of Wine and Roses is their debut, very well known. Medicine Show, their second album, both highly, highly recommended. They've been associated with some neo-psych, jangle pop, heavily influenced as well by, I would say, the Velvet Underground, Television, and similar to Television, they've got the dueling guitars, not in sort of a Thin Lizzy kind of way, but more in an indie guitar, Television kind of way, weaving amongst each other. Just highly, highly recommended if you like that kind of sound. Again, Velvet Underground, Television, the dual guitars. Steve Wynn, the leader of this band. This band went through a few lineup changes. This is not the original lineup, but I think there's 2 members from the original lineup and 3 from the last recording unit from back in the 80s. And the 4th member is a guitarist who played in Steve Wynn's solo band. But Steve Wynn and that guitarist, I forget his name, I think it's Victor something, they sound amazing. There's just some amazing guitar build-ups on this. highly, highly recommended. Another album that came out in September that I was really looking forward to is from this band, Prophets of Rage. And as you can probably tell from the artwork, this band is three former members of Rage Against the Machine, Tom Morello being the main guy here, Brad Wilk, and I forget the name of the bass player now. But this is basically Rage Against the Machine minus Zach De La Rocha, and taking his place you have two huge figures in rap. You have Chuck D from Public Enemy, and Be Real from Cypress Hill, and those guys do an amazing job on the vocals. There's some amazing rapping back and forth between these two guys. They complement each other very well. And then, of course, you have the backbone of the band, Tom Morello and the Rage Against the Machine guys. Just sound amazing, and there's some awesome lyrics on this album. And it was billed with as the soundtrack against the resistance. And I guess a comment on the political environment of today with this beautiful red marbled vinyl. The political environment of today with Donald Trump as president of the US. So the band felt, you need a soundtrack for that. So that's what this is. This is excellent. If you're a fan of Rage Against the Machine, you're gonna love this. And even if you're a casual fan of Rage Against the Machine or of Cypress Hill or of Public Enemy, this is highly recommended. I've shown recently some Big Star albums, #1 record. I showed that. I think Radio City, and a compilation that I got, and a live album. And one album that was released back in 1992 by a former member of Big Star is an album by Chris Bell. This is I Am the Cosmos. Chris Bell died in 1978, and this album didn't come out until 1992. But the recordings on here, I think there was the single I Am the Cosmos that did come out while Chris Bell was still alive. But for any Big Star fans out there, this is highly, highly recommended. This is as good as #1 record in Radio City, in my opinion. And this came out when Big Star was really experiencing a renaissance in the 90s, when bands like Teenage Fan Club, The Posies, and bands like that were name-checking Big Star as a huge influence. So this is a reissue that just came out. I've been waiting for this to come out on vinyl forever. I've had the CD since back when it came out in 92. But again, if you're even remotely interested in Big Star, this is an album that you probably already have, but if you don't have it, you should get it. Great sound on this reissue as well. Chris Bell, I Am the Cosmos. And I have a 10-inch EP. I've shown before some Primus, and I'm a big Primus fan. This is for Les Claypool's project with Sean Lennon. It's called the Claypool Lennon Delirium. This is a 10-inch that came out originally this year on Record Store Day. I didn't get that, but on Record Store Day, but it came out most recently in I guess expanded issue. 4-song EP, and I gotta show you the vinyl of this. Some beautiful green splatter vinyl. Hope you can see that okay. 4-song EP, all live songs. You have Pink Floyd's Astronomy Domain, I believe is how you pronounce it. You have The Who's Boris the Spider, which was a song that was written by John Entwistle. You have King Crimson, In the Court of the Crimson King, and you have a song, Satori, I think it's called, by the Flower Traveling Band, I think is the name of the band. Some of you guys have shown that band's release. It's that one with the Japanese guys naked on motorcycles. Quite an interesting cover. So I believe that's a song. I think shout out to Clay over at his channel's Joe L. I think he showed recently released by the Flower Traveling Band, Satori. I think it was their second album. That's not the album with the dudes on the motorcycles, but this is an excellent EP, and again, all live. Claypool, Lennon, Delirium, and it's called Lime and Lipid Green, which is a lyric from the Pink Floyd song Astronomy Domain. And then related to Primus, I have 3 CDs that I got recently. A couple of them are used. We have Primus's 5th album back in the 90s. This is the brown album. This is not the original cover. I'm not quite sure why I came in this kind of cover. The original cover actually looks something like the CD. And this was, like I said, Primus's 5th album, which was the first album they made without their drummer, Tim Herb Alexander. And this is pretty good. It's got Brian Brain Mattia on drums. I guess the best known, most well-known song off of this album is Shake Hands with Beef. I also got Primus's, the album after that, their 6th album, called Anti-Pop. This is also with Brain on drums as well. These 2 Primus albums are actually quite good. I was unfamiliar with these albums. The most well-known song on this album here is Lacquerhead. And then, being that I've sort of regenerated my interest in Primus, I got this CD, which is by a band called Sausage. This is the band that Les Claypool formed with 2 original members of Primus, Todd Huth on guitar and Jay Lane on drums. Jay Lane actually had rejoined Primus for their reunion album, which was their 7th album, called Green Naugahyde. That was back in 2011, I believe. Jay Lane, I mean, a lot of people associate Herb Alexander with as being the Primus drummer, but Jay Lane is an awesome drummer as well. And this lineup here with Claypool, Huth, and Lane was actually the very first Primus lineup that existed when they were known as Primate, and then they became Primus. But before they released their first album, Frizzle Fry, as Primus, they had gone to the more classic lineup, which was Larry Lalonde on guitar and Tim Alexander on drums. But this basically sounds a lot like Primus, as you can imagine, and is highly recommended for Primus fans. Sausage is the name of the band, and it's a direct reference, I think, to a demo that was originally floating around when this lineup existed as Primus. They decided to call this band Sausage, and Riddles Are Abound Tonight is the name of the album. And that's it, guys. Thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you next time.